So thanks for coming out. I know it's a holiday technically, so I'm not sure if we might have had more people. But like Ashley said, I'm with the Citizens Utility Board. So how many of you have heard of Citizens Utility Board before? Have you ever attended one of our events previously? So just to fill in any gaps that you might have, C.U.B is a consumer watchdog group, and we're fairly unique in that we were created by an act of the General Assembly in 1983. So what that means is that we have a statutory role to play, but we're not a government entity. So we're funded by donations and grants, but we have, by law, a seat at the table in any kind of discussion or rule-making or law-making process. So our purpose is to defend the ratepayers and the general public interest in anything that's related to utilities. So, a lot of people think that there's not much to talk about, you just pay your bill, but there's actually a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, so we stay real busy. We have about 20 staff, and about half of them are attorneys and lobbyists that are in Springfield, and then the rest of us are like me, and we go around the state talking to people, or we're in the office answering questions on our hotline. So that is all to say that we work for you. So definitely take advantage. Even if you're not a donor, we're here to help you. So we have a statewide hotline, and again, I'm here today to talk about some of the things that you should know. So hopefully you all have the handouts and you got your free light bulb. What I'd like to do is talk about gas, electric, and phone in that order. Now I already know I got a sneak preview that there's going to be a question about telephone. And I usually wrap up with the telephone just because people have more questions about that and it's more confusing. So starting with natural gas, everybody here probably has NICOR, right? You may have noticed that the bills aren't as much trouble as they may have been in previous winters. Natural gas prices are at relative low. In the past, since the time I've worked at C.U.B, I've seen the natural gas prices go up over $1 a therm. At this point, NICOR is charging about 27 cents a therm. So you can see there's a wide variation. The typical consumer, however, doesn't really know what a therm of gas is, and definitely doesn't know how much a therm of gas should cost. So that's where some of the confusion comes in, because you're looking at how much you have to write the check for every month, and it's hard to figure out which, if it was $200 in December and then it's $300 in January, why is it more? Is it because it's colder, or is it because the gas price went up? The other problem is we have alternative energy companies that may be soliciting, so you might have an alternative supplier on your bill. In the gas market, we have found that most people don't save money with the alternative suppliers. So if you are a NICOR customer and you have a line item on your bill that says customer select or supplier charges or the name of another company other than NICOR, most likely it's probably not a good deal. So again, if you get an offer in the mail and they tell you we're offering to lock you in at 49 cents a therm, that might sound like 49 cents sounds cheap, but most people don't realize that NICOR right now is 27 cents, so 49 cents would not be a good deal. The other thing about natural gas is that the price of the commodity itself changes monthly. So the natural gas market is a lot more volatile than the electricity market. Your electricity prices generally change once a year, and we'll go into that in a minute. But your natural gas prices change every month. So according to the price of natural gas on the open market, natural gas is largely a domestic resource. Most of it comes from the United States. It's not like oil, and it's related sometimes to oil and coal extraction. So one of the things that has driven the prices down is the rise of what they call fracking. So I'm sure you've heard of hydraulic fracturing, which is a method to extract oil. One of the byproducts of that is natural gas. So we get a lot of natural gas, and the market price goes down. So regardless of what you think about the environmental impact of fracking, it is impacting your utility bills in a good way. Any questions about gas? Okay, so we'll move on to the electricity. Electricity in some ways is simpler because the price is relatively stable. So in Illinois, we have something called the Illinois Power Agency, and they tell ComEd what the price is going to be. And they set that price once a year. So it's coming up in the spring. In May, they will do an auction and determine what the price for all ComEd customers will be, and then that will go into effect in June. When they set the price, they set a summer price and a non-summer price, so it's going to be two prices. The difference is that in the summer, they get to charge you just a little bit more because there's more demand. The problem with that, though, is that there are also alternative electric suppliers. And even with the Illinois Power Agency stepping in, ComEd's parent company is Exelon, and they own the majority of the electricity generation facilities in northern Illinois. So that's one of the reasons why we have the Illinois Power Agency. Otherwise, before the creation of the IPA, we had ComEd buying and selling electricity from itself and claiming that they were getting the best price. So this happened several years ago, and it's one of our most important victories because we were instrumental in getting that Illinois Power Agency created so that there's an outside entity, a government entity, that helps to determine what a fair price is for the public. Any questions? So, alternative suppliers. How many of you have had somebody knock on your door or call and ask about an electricity price or an electricity offer? No? Nobody? Yes? Okay. The electricity market is also deregulated. It's a lot more complicated because there's a lot more alternative companies. There are 84 different alternative suppliers certified to do business in ComEd territory, as opposed to about 12 that might be competing for your gas in NICOR territory. So the market is flooded with alternative supply companies that are trying to make a buck, and you kind of have to ask yourself, how are these companies making money by saving you money? What's so attractive to them that they want to try to make money this way? Well, the fact of the matter is they will try to charge, they quote you a price, and then they scramble around on the backside trying to find the cheapest price possible for themselves to buy the electricity. And it's essentially, they're speculating in the futures, the electricity futures market. So in some cases, they may get you a cheaper price than ComEd. So we can't say unequivocally that it's a bad deal, but even if they do get you a cheaper price, it's not going to last. So when you go with an alternative supplier, you have to be vigilant and watch your bills. And it's harder for us to explain that to the public because, like I said, with the gas, our messaging is very clear. We say, don't switch, just stick with NICOR. On the electric side, you may get a better price, but you have to be very careful. So quick quiz, like we did with the gas, how much should a kilowatt hour of electricity cost? Okay, good answer. I'd be surprised if anybody shouted out 7.02 cents. So that's the ComEd price right now. And like I said, that's going to change coming up in May and June. But roughly 7 cents is how much ComEd charges. So if somebody comes to the door or sends you something in the mail, and they want to lock you in at 9 cents. Again, 9 cents sounds like a cheap price, but it's actually 2 cents more expensive than ComEd. So these small amounts, when you multiply them by the number of kilowatt hours that you use, it's going to add up quickly. So if you're overpaying by 2 cents a kilowatt hour and you use 1,000 kilowatt hours, that's going to be $20 that your bill is. It's going to be increased by $20 on the supply. So that's a significant amount. Any questions? That is correct. So ComEd is always going to be your delivery company. So you can't, if you get mad at ComEd because they trimmed your tree the wrong way, or because they didn't read your meter, or because the customer service rep was rude to you, you can't switch to another company just to make ComEd mad, because you're still going to be stuck with ComEd. In 99% of the time, you still get your bill from ComEd, and they're still responsible for all the infrastructure. So on your bill, it's divided, and I'll direct you to one of the handouts now. Talking about electric competition, there's a little diagram of your ComEd bill, and it kind of explains, it's broken down into delivery and supply. Delivery, supply, and then taxes. So the delivery portion is always the same. A lot of times when people call our hotline or approach us at an event, they say, hey, I've got this other company, this Allego Energy or IDT Energy, and they're charging me on top of ComEd. And people don't quite understand that they replace one of the line items on your bill with their charges. If you don't have a supplier, you still have to pay ComEd for the supply. So I like to relate it to the old days with Ameritech telephone, when you had to have Ameritech provide your phone, but you had all these different long distance companies that you could choose from. So you would get a bill that came from Ameritech, and then for the calls to California, it would say, a section would say Sprint or MCI or whatever. That's the same kind of thing that's going on here. So if you choose a third-party company to represent you in the electricity market to get a better price, their charges will be inserted into your ComEd bill. In the sheet that I passed around, we try to break it down for the public, and you can see it's several pages long. These are all the offers as of right now that are available, and you can tell which companies have an exit fee and how long the price is good for. So I told you ComEd is at it's essentially 7 cents a kilowatt hour. The very first offer is with AEP Energy, and it's for 5.6 cents a kilowatt hour. So technically that is cheaper than ComEd, but it's only for 6 months. So that means that their price is going to change. If you sign up today, their price is going to change before the ComEd price changes, and invariably, the price always goes up at the end of that at the end of that time period. And so once that period has expired, they switch to a variable rate, but variable means expensive. That's what it means. So any questions? Electricity supply. I'll just reiterate for the newcomers that we do have a utility bill clinic coming up on April 8th in this building. And at the clinic, we sit down one-on-one, so we'll set up like 3 or 4 staff people, and consumers come up and talk to us about their bills. So I encourage you to come back with your bills. One of the things that we find at the clinics is that we'll get people that come in and they're completely exasperated with Comcast, for example. And of course, we'll talk to them about cable and phone and stuff like that. But we also, when we look at for example, their ComEd bill, we may find that they also have an alternate supplier. And so a lot of people have one on either their gas or electric, and they don't realize it. So I encourage you to come back for that. When we go to the telephone, he asked about AT&T. That brings up one of our more recent victories. Just last year, we were successful in keeping landline telephone service available in Illinois. AT&T is very aggressive in pushing people onto the U-verse. A lot of people don't have a landline phone anymore at all. I certainly don't. And if you do have a landline, I actually do. I have a landline, but it's an internet line. And if you do have a landline, a lot of people are getting it through Comcast or AT&T U-verse. However, the traditional analog service, like the old-fashioned Ma Bell and the wall that's on the phone that's on the wall in the kitchen, that infrastructure is still there. There's nothing wrong with it. Most of it's in the public way, and most of it was paid for by Illinois, the public, because it dates back to a time when things were much more heavily regulated. So we own it. AT&T doesn't really own it. So we were able to successfully argue that they do still have to offer that, and they have to offer it at an affordable rate. So for a lot of people, definitely the landline telephone service is going the way of the dinosaur. It doesn't meet their needs. But interestingly enough, there are pockets throughout the state of Illinois where there is no cell service and there is no high-speed internet service. So in rural parts of Illinois, as well as some parts of more populated areas, for whatever reason, people have no other option than traditional landline. So if you want to have a landline, you still have the right to get one, and you shouldn't let AT&T tell you that it's not available. So the way it works, if you get your voice telephone service through AT&T U-verse or through Comcast, it's a digital internet-based voice transmission. It'll still work with the phone that's attached to your house. The change happens behind the scenes. So it'll still be plugged into the same jack inside your house. In some cases, they actually wire it through the modem, so it depends. I know for Comcast, they still use the same jack. My parents have Comcast, and they got rid of their AT&T landline and switched their number over to Comcast, and they were so confused for the longest time. They didn't realize that their phone didn't work when their computer was off. So I was, I would say, you never answer your phone, and they had voicemail sitting in there because they didn't even know they had a Comcast voicemail. They have an answering machine, so yeah, that's what happens. In most cases, they route it through the computer. The exception is if you don't have a computer. So for AT&T U-verse, it is possible to have U-verse phone and U-verse TV and not have the internet at all, in which case they will put some kind of a, I'm not sure what to call it, it's like a device that makes it so that the digital signal can go through your analog lines. It depends on how it's hooked up. That's a little bit beyond the scope of utility regulation, but that's one of the reasons why we fought to keep the analog service available, because the new technologies are fairly confusing to a lot of people. And I can tell, I have a daughter that's in college, and the millennials are supposed to know all this stuff. She doesn't know all that stuff either. So, I mean, it gets very complicated depending on what kind of computer you have and what kind of modem you have. So. Yeah, for the traditional analog service, most of those telephone lines are in the public way, so they're in what are called utility easements, and so they're already in the ground along the same place where the electric lines go, or they're already, the switching stations and stuff like that. They're mostly not they're not in somebody's yard, you know what I mean? They're in some sort of public space. And they were built at a time when there wasn't any deregulation, so the people of Illinois subsidized the installation of all that, especially ever since World War II when all the new developments were being built. So everything out here that was built, more recently, yeah. At that time, when it was a cornfield and then they put up the houses, all Illinois ratepayers paid for the cost of building the new telephone lines out to the place where the new houses were. And that's still the way that it works for electricity and natural gas. So any place in ComEd and NICOR territory, when they put up a new development, the developer and the people who buy the houses, they don't necessarily have to pay for all the cost of running electricity and gas out there. They pay for some of it, but some of it is subsidized by our rates because the companies are obligated to provide gas or electricity to anybody who requests it. So they charge a fee for the installing it, but part of it is underwritten in their rate structure. And that's the way the telephone used to be too. So long story short, AT&T today is a direct descendant of the old Ma Bell, and they own pieces of land and pieces of equipment that were funded by us, just like the Exelon nuclear plants. So it's a little bit before my time, but I know that when they built the nuclear plants, they assessed the public to help subsidize the cost of building the nuclear plants, because at that time they were owned by ComEd, and ComEd was delivering, and they were telling us that, nuclear is cleaner and cheaper, so it's going to pay off in the long run. After they were all paid off, ComEd was bought by Exelon. Exelon decided to, or ComEd sold the power plants to Exelon. So even though the people of Illinois had paid to build them, ComEd as a company sold the plants to another company. So it gets very accounting heavy. But that's the kind of stuff that our attorneys and policy folks spend a lot of time digging into. It really depends on the situation. So like when you see those really big power lines, in a lot of cases, that land is owned by ComEd because they cut a strip through there for their large, like, and the transformer substations and things like that. In other cases, they are in an easement that's granted by the town. So you might have lines that run along the property line through your backyard, or you might have lines that run along a public street. So they're granted an easement by the city, or depending on where it is. So sometimes they own the land and sometimes they're getting it for free. Those are the kind of questions that we like to answer. So any other questions about telephone or cable or anything else? Then I'll wrap up talking about energy efficiency, because that's another thing that we like to try to get people thinking about. One of your other handouts, you should have a yellow booklet and a little brochure that looks like this. I don't think you have new electric meters in this particular zip code yet, but they're coming. So you do have them. Okay, good. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the new meters, because we do get a ton of questions about it, and we were very involved in the development of the program to roll out the new technology. We wanted to make sure that ratepayers didn't pay for more than necessary, that the utility company paid for as much as possible out of their own operating budgets. And we also wanted to make sure that people got the best possible deal on the new price plans that are available with the smart meters. Did you say that your smart meter is a pain in the butt? The reason they're replacing everything is because the infrastructure is aging. So many of the old meters had been in there since the house was built. And so they had a really good run. A lot of those meters are 50, 60 years old even. So when they put in the new meter, they may discover that the old meter was running slow. So that's one legitimate explanation for why the new meter might make your bill go up. ComEd doesn't have a very good communication style, so that could be what has happened, and nobody really explained it to you. So we'd like to talk and look at your bills in particular to see if you're a relatively savvy consumer. You can, if you keep your bills, I always keep my bills, you can kind of see, did my usage go up or did the prices go up? Because ComEd has had some rate increases in the last several years, so the rate increase would have coincided with your meter installation in some ways, but the rate increases for ComEd have not been enough to make your bill increase dramatically. So it's possible that you have an alternate supplier. Maybe you don't realize that it's on there, or you could have been slammed, or it could be a problem with the new meter. That's the least likely, but you said they replaced it, right? So did the usage and bill amount change again when they replaced the meter? Because if they actually did replace the meter, that tells me that they found a problem with the first one. So yeah, it's not perfect. Once in a while there are problems. A lot of people were very concerned about the meter fires when they had the pilot. The fires turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because in all cases, the fires were actually caused by electrical problems inside the home, and they were older homes that had older wiring. So there was a fire at the meter site. It wasn't the meter that caught on fire, and it had to do with an electrical problem in the home. So ComEd wasn't really liable for that, but as a result of all the hubbub, they added a big extra layer of protection for the public. So now every time you get a new meter, you're essentially, or everybody who gets a new meter is essentially getting a bit of a free electrical inspection as well. So if they get to your property and if they determine that there's anything going on that might not properly accommodate the meter, they won't install it. And then, they'll notify you that you should have an electrician investigate. So that's a good thing, we think. Any questions about that? Okay, so when you do get the new meter, and I think everybody raised their hand, in here, it lists how the meter has new capabilities that enable you to save money and save energy, because the digital meters keep track not only of how much electricity passes through, they're able to tell what time of day you're using it. So they have the RealTime Pricing, and they also have the PeakTime Rebate. And these are things that enable you to get a different price at different times of the day. So with real-time pricing, you'll be paying only like 1 or 2 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity that's used in off-peak hours. You may be paying more than 7 cents for electricity that you use during peak time. It usually evens out to about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So we encourage people to do the real-time pricing, with the caveat that if you're retired, and I think this is a senior meeting, right? At any rate, if you're retired and you're home a lot during the day, the real-time pricing might not be ideal for you. But for people that are gone during the day, it's almost impossible not to save money, because the average price goes down to about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, peak time savings, they don't charge you any more. There's no way for your bill to ever go up, but they give you a rebate for reducing your consumption during certain times of the day. So when we talk about peak demand on the electrical grid, it roughly mirrors rush hour traffic. So the heaviest traffic on the electrical grid is in the evenings between like 4 and 7. So it's when all the kids are getting home from school and turning on the TV and the Xbox, and everybody's coming home and making dinner. And so if you look at a map of it, it shoots up. So the key to getting a peak time rebate is using less electricity during that time of day. Peak time rebate is not ideal for, like I said, working families, because if that's when you use the most of your electricity, you're probably not going to be able to reduce it. So peak time rebate is a much better deal for people who are home during the day, because you can move your dishwasher and your vacuum and your laundry outside of that 3 to 7 window, so things that use a lot of electricity. Any questions? That's kind of an innovation, because until the new meters came in, the only way to to save electricity was to use less. So you would have to turn the lights off, or run a shorter wash cycle, or use a dimmer light bulb or something like that. Turn the thermostat down so that your furnace isn't running as much. With the peak time savings and real-time pricing, you can save dollars without reducing your overall consumption. So you don't have to do without light or anything like that. You don't have to run your dishwasher every other day instead of every day. You can actually reduce your costs just by changing the time of day. And what that does, it makes, the more people sign up for that and do those things, it incrementally helps ComEd manage the electricity throughout the grid. So if you think of it, again, in the model of rush hour traffic, it's like kind of like those on-ramps things that have the stop-go light. The traffic is always going to be there, but it makes it just a little bit more manageable if they stop people from flooding on all at once.
So you have to sign up for this?
Yes, and there's a number in the brochure where you can call, and they'll put you on it. You probably already have the meter. You have the meter? You guys are together, right? Yeah, so the meter is there, but they're not going to put you on a different price plan unless you ask for that price plan. So if you sign up for one of the plans in the brochure, it is a different price structure that is based on information that comes from the new meter. So your bill will look the same, but some of the math will look different. And it also, those two plans, they come with a web component, so you can go on the internet and access detailed information about your consumption. You can probably already do that if you have the smart meter, and you can see like, oh, this is when I use electricity the most. So it's optional though. If you want to just stay on the traditional flat way that it's always been. But some people actually enjoy that kind of stuff. I live in a little bit of a hole because at C.U.B. we all get excited about anything that has to do with utilities. So, but I've talked to people that know more about it than I do because they just enjoy learning something new. So, especially if you're a homeowner and you get this you get this printout that shows when you were using electricity and you're wondering, why is there a spike at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when nobody's home? And then figure out, oh, my sump pump kicked on or something like that. So go ahead. Repeat the question. Okay, so her question was basically now everybody has the standard rates unless you sign up for another program. No, actually, you can do real-time pricing and PeakTime savings even if you have a third-party supplier. That's a great question because the discounts from these programs affect your ComEd delivery charges. So anybody can sign up for these. So ideally, you could save a lot of money by, like, you could layer all these things. You could sign up for real-time pricing sign up for PeakTime savings and find an alternate supplier that's only charging 5 cents and take a bunch of energy efficiency measures, and you could cut your bill dramatically by doing all those things together.
So when you say Constellation,
That is Constellation. So all the people that are listed in the white packet,
those are the third party.
anybody other than ComEd is what I mean when I say third party. Or you can say alternate supplier. Sometimes the term alternative supplier gets people confused because they're thinking that it means alternative energy, as in coming from windmills and solar panels and things like that. And that's a whole nother aspect of the alternative suppliers because some of them offer a green plan. And we don't particularly like the green plans because they tend to mislead people into thinking that if you sign up for their green plan, which costs extra, then somehow you're going to be directly linked and your electricity is going to come from a wind farm instead of from a nuclear plant. And it doesn't work that way. They can call it a green plan and then they're offsetting the electricity with renewable energy certificates. So you may be subsidizing the construction of a wind farm somewhere, or you subsidizing some sort of campaign against rainforest deforestation, anything that counts as reducing the global carbon footprint. They can get a renewable energy certificate and call your plan green, but it's not quite the same thing as what they purport it to be in a lot of cases. It's actually, if you sign up for the real-time pricing, the price of your electricity changes throughout the day. Now, if you sign up for PeakTime savings, you will be billed the same price, the same as the rest of ComEd service territory, but they give you a rebate for every kilowatt hour that you don't use during those peak times. And how they know, the way that they determine how much you're not using is by comparing your consumption to your own consumption at the same time last year. So if in June of 2016, if you sign up for PeakTime rebate, then if in June of, let's say August, because that's when there's like a lot of heat waves, if in August of 2015, maybe you used 1,000 kilowatt hours with your air conditioning running, and then they get to August of 2016, and you only use 900 because you made an effort to turn down or turn up your air conditioner a little bit, then you would get a PeakTime rebate for the number of kilowatt hours that you didn't use during the peak times. So does that make sense? So the one that we put in the brochure, it says C.U.B recommends. That's the peak time because it's all incentive with no possibility of a penalty. With the real time, There's the small possibility that you could pay more just if you happen to use all of your electricity during the most expensive hours. So the real-time plan, you pay a different price at different times of the day. So theoretically you could, but again, our finding over the last several years has been that the typical customer pays about 4 cents a kilowatt hour with the real-time. So it's a much more significant savings than switching to another company. He was asking if you signed up for one of the programs, and if you're a senior that's home during the day and the air conditioning is going, then your only option would be to turn the air conditioning off at that time. And he's saying, is that how it would work? And that is how it works, but it's not as threatening as it might seem. Because if you have your air conditioning on in the summer, one of the most efficient ways to run your air conditioning is just to set it, right? Or if you have a programmable thermostat, it might go up and down a little bit. But wherever you set it, if you set it at 72 or 74 or 70, whatever you like, then, it's going to kick on and off throughout the day in order to maintain that temperature. If you were to get on the PeakTime savings program, they would alert you when they were coming up to a PeakTime event. So if it was the middle of August and they were having a heat wave and they thought they were at risk, they were getting, nearing the opportunity for a brownout, then they would notify all their PeakTime participants to please, reduce your consumption during this time period. Usually they do it preventatively, so they kind of know in advance if there's going to be an event. And then if you wanted to get the credit on your bill, you don't have to turn your air conditioning off. But if you had it on 70, you could kick it up to 72. Or if you had it on 72, kick it up to 74 so that compressor is running a little bit less. And that's all it takes, because if everybody who's on the program does that, it's just enough to pull back the strain on the grid just enough. Then when you do that, they're going to give you a credit on your bill. No, and usually you can't, because once you're on the program, you can sign up and you can cancel, but you can't kind of go on and off, on and off. So no, you wouldn't be able to modify it with your vacation. But going back to the other question about the hot day with the air conditioner, if you had the real-time pricing program, that same situation, if it was nearing brownout capacity and you were running your air conditioner, if you were on real-time pricing, that would be a moment when your electricity would be very expensive. And so you would probably want to turn it up in order to reduce the consumption, because at those peak times, if you're on the real-time program, that electricity is going to cost you like 15, 16 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, our finding is that even despite the fact that at certain times you might be paying that very premium price, it evens out. So it's a net savings. Oh, that's a great question. If your account is less than a year old, how do they sign you up for PeakTime? I actually don't know the answer to that. So that's a good question. I'd have to find out. I know that if you're a new account, there's a problem if you want to get on budget billing. So if they don't have data for your particular household, it's going to be based on the consumption history at that premise. And I'm pretty sure that the same thing would work. It would work the same way for PeakTime savings. So I don't think they would want to discourage anyone from getting on the program. So most likely they would base it on the consumption of the last occupant. Because the meter has the data, so their system can tell what that house was doing a year ago. But that could be a little bit dicey, because you might not get the right benefit out of the program for yourself if you're not comparing to yourself. Now, if you are pretty sure that you use less electricity than the last resident, it would be like an easy way for you to get the credit. Like if it's 2 people in the house as opposed to the previous owners had 6 people or something like that. Theoretically, that could happen, but it also has to do with, it gets very sophisticated in how they determine the peak time events. So they're not looking at, I used the monthly total as an easy mathematical device, but they're looking at the consumption during that particular time period. So if they're going to have a peak time event, they're looking at how much electricity you used during that time period historically. So you'll get the credit if you use less than you did previously. But at some point, it might. The other thing is the events are at different times. And so this summer they might have an event in June. Next summer they might have an event in August. So it depends. And my understanding is that there's not an event every month. But if you have the Peak Time program, you still are going to get a little bit of a credit for participating in it. So my mom and dad are on Peak Time savings, and I always look at their bills. So even in the months when there isn't high strain on the grid, they're still getting like a couple dollars credit. Then I remember last summer, in 1 month, they got like $8 credit because they took advantage of, they were notified to reduce their consumption, and they did. So ComEd gave them like $8. When you sign up, they ask you how you want to be notified. So it'll be by email or text message or telephone call. So you can choose. They're two different programs. So if you sign up for the Peak Time rebate, there is no time period when you're paying more. So you're always paying the ComEd standard price, and if you take that action, they give you a credit on your bill. So that's why they call it a rebate. So they give you an instant rebate on that month's bill. The idea is, no, they're not going to raise the rates on you later, because the way that it works behind the scenes, the more people sign up for real-time pricing and peak time savings, that's every account that gets on the rolls of those programs, it further enables, theoretically, it further enables the electric company to have better data and make better predictions and increase the efficiency of their overall operation. And so it is supposed to tighten the accounting on how much electricity they need and how much electricity they're going to need, which theoretically should reduce all of our rates, or at least keep them from increasing. Just making the entire rate setting process a little bit more accurate. Well, they're not going to give you a credit, but you'll still be notified when there's a peak time event coming, because and they make they give you what's called day ahead pricing too. So they give you a little warning if the prices are going to be more expensive tomorrow. But so they're not going to give you, you're not going to see a thing on your bill that says credit $8.22. You just have to be careful not to use as much. They do still offer that, yeah, the central AC cycling program. I think they have a $10 and a $5 version. And I think that's where some people get confused. They think that when they have the new meter, it's going to somehow enable the electric company to control their appliances in some fashion. Yeah. Yeah, that's a separate program. So you can get a credit for having a device installed on your central air conditioner, and it's a $10 credit if you go 100%, and it's a $5 credit if you go 50%. And what they do, it's kind of an early precursor to some of these more sophisticated price programs. You get the credit regardless of whether or not they ever do anything to your air conditioner. But just for allowing them to put the device on, it gives them the capability, if they're nearing brownout capacity, to remotely cycle off the compressor on your air conditioner. So if it's a really hot day, again, if everybody's running their air conditioner and you have your air conditioning set at 72, the fan will keep going. But if ComEd's grid is getting to the point where it's just overstressed, they will cycle off 50,000 air conditioners throughout the service territory, and it only goes off for 5 or 10 minutes. Most people don't notice the difference. So I had it at my house, and the house is already cooled, and so if the compressor goes off for 5 or 10 minutes, your house is not going to change in temperature. And then when the crisis on the grid has passed, it just goes back to its normal operation. So we have never had a complaint from anybody that said they shut off my air conditioning and I had a heart attack or something. Yes, a kilowatt hour is 1,000 watts of electricity being used for 1 hour. The thing is that there's different ways to use a kilowatt hour. So on your bill, it actually says 1 kilowatt hour is 10 100 watt light bulbs being on for an hour. But if you have, I'm trying to think of a good appliance. Like if you have a dehumidifier and it's 1,000 watts, or a space heater that's like 1,000 watts, then if you run that thing for 1 hour, you just used a kilowatt hour. I might have to kick that over to Ashley because your water comes through the village, and then I think the village is buying it, like you said, from the city of Chicago. I will say that C.U.B is not directly involved in those kind of water dealings. We do get involved with water companies. So outside of the Chicagoland area, a lot of people have Illinois American Water and Aqua Illinois, and they are water service companies. We do get involved in water when it comes to those, but in your case, you're dealing with the village of Hoffman Estates, and they're dealing with the city of Chicago. So, well, we get a lot of complaints about that from city of Chicago residents too, because their rates have gone up, and I think water is, no pun intended, but it's a really hot commodity at this point. I mean, you know that throughout the whole country, there's a crackdown on water. So water is definitely going to become more expensive for everybody. Now, the question of who's paying for what is more political, I think. Myself, I grew up in Roselle, and when I was growing up, we had well water, and I remember when we switched to city water, and it was supposed to be cheaper and better, but I always liked the well water, personally. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see if any towns ever get fed up with the Lake Michigan water and decide to go back to well water or something like that, because that's probably at some point going to become cheaper to get the water out of the town's own ground than to, yeah, that's, well, maybe Ashley can speak to that about the way that Hoffman Estates handles the water.
I can just talk about that briefly. I am not in finance. I am not completely aware, but it is a portion of our expenses are based on, like you said, the city of Chicago's water and the pricing that we're incurring from that entity. We also work with the Joint Action Water Agency, so JAWA, on our side, and that's a big coalition and group of municipalities that work through JAWA, who also supplies our water. And so she's right, water may be getting more expensive. For a long time, water was not charged at the real cost, essentially, of supplying it. And so I think that that's accounts for a portion of why municipalities may see an increase, or why the city of Chicago is raising their pricing. Then that's the only other thing I really know at this point, is that we are in discussion with either other municipalities in JAWA or just kind of under general discussion, looking into other options for water supply, so outside of the city of Chicago. So it really just depends on what we can see, but we are trying to do what we can to reduce some of the cost for water and our supply. Right, I think we've all seen some increase, a good increase in the cost for water and other utilities, and that's why it's important to have people like you here to discuss it. And if you have seen some very large increase in your water bill, you know, it's always a good idea to check for leaks and those kinds of things. If you have questions, I know we have tests that we have at the front counter, even at the Village Hall, for testing for leaks in your, you know, appliances and toilets and sinks and things like that. So always ask if there's a question before it's, you know, months out. We're certainly willing to help identify what the issue might be. So, okay.
And on that note, I think everything has flowed really well today. I'll close with talking about ways to save gas, electricity, and water. So you should have a little booklet that we prepared. It's yellow, and it says Home Energy Savings. It's a compilation of several fact sheets that talk about different ways to save electricity and natural gas, and it gives a more in-depth overview of some of the programs that we were talking about, like the real-time pricing and things like that. Also, it talks about the ComEd and NICOR Energy Smart program, and I'm going to pass this clipboard around if anyone would like to sign up for it while I describe it to you. If you put your name, just hang on to it until so you can decide if you want to put your name there. First of all, when you look at your ComEd and NICOR bills, there's a line item that says if you're being charged for something that says efficiency programs. It's just a couple cents usually. But what that is all the ratepayers are underwriting efforts by ComEd and NICOR to encourage everyone to reduce their gas and electricity consumption. And that's something that actually it's a federal mandate. So throughout the country, we're all being pressed to use less gas and electricity and all that. So they have an obligation to help their customers reduce their consumption. Much of the program is paid for by ComEd and NICOR, but ratepayers are assessed a fee to help underwrite the costs. And you can qualify for a whole bunch of free stuff. That's the bottom line. So if you put your name on the clipboard, they will call you to schedule an appointment for a free home energy savings assessment, and they will come out and do a direct install of several simple devices. So if you don't already have a programmable thermostat, they will install a programmable thermostat and program it for you. If you already have a programmable thermostat, you might have the opportunity to upgrade to a fancier one, or at least have the technician program it for you. Because I know at my house, I have a programmable thermostat and I've never programmed it. It's still at the same setting as the manufacturer had it. They also give you low-flow sink and shower heads, and that will have a direct impact on your water consumption. Going back to water, the reason they give that to you is because it also reduces your hot water consumption, and your hot water heater is one of your baseline users of gas. So most people have an old-fashioned hot water tank, and the less hot water you use, the less gas you will use because the tank is always on. So a lot of people ask, why is my gas bill $30 in the middle of July? I'm not using my heat and I'm not baking. Well, your hot water heater is still going. So that's why you can never quite get to a zero consumption of gas. What else do they give you? They change all your light bulbs. So they'll change pretty much every light bulb in your house that they can. They'll put in the compact fluorescents for free, or they will put in the new LED bulbs for a reduced cost. So I had the program done at my house, and I opted to upgrade to LEDs, and I got out my debit card right there, and they charged me $15. So I got 5 LED bulbs, so they were $3 each. And the guy installed them for me. So, those are at the hardware store, they're going to be $7 or $8. So you can either take the compact fluorescents for free or get the upgrade. And smart power strips. Those are the power strips that you plug all your electronics into to help reduce the phantom load, all your TVs and your VCR and your computer. And they installed that for me too, because I wouldn't have known what to plug in where. So those go about $19.99 to $29.99 if you went to the hardware store to buy one. So you're really going to get your money's worth out of that line item that's on your bill. And you don't have to be a senior, you don't have to meet any income guidelines. It's just for anybody. So I would encourage you to sign up on the clipboard, and then C.U.B, as a courtesy, we just fax those over to NICOR, and then they will contact you to make an appointment. No, it's a partnership between ComEd and NICOR. So as long as you have a ComEd account, you can do it. Our partnership is with NICOR, so we send it to NICOR, but they know that if you have a ComEd account, you can still do it. Yeah, in the yellow booklet, it tells you the specific number to call. I think it's on the back. The home energy assessment. The number's right there. Call 855-433-2700. And then in the last page of the booklet, it also talks about rebate programs. So if you're thinking of upgrading anything in your home, if you're thinking of investing in a new hot water heater or a new HVAC system or something that is going to be fairly costly, you may be able to take advantage of some rebates on particular high energy efficient models. And sometimes the rebate is instant, and other times you have to buy it outright and then submit and get a rebate from NICOR. So there's a lot of different opportunities. The answer is yes. There have probably been plenty of studies. I don't know how they compare. I do know that gas hot water heating is cheaper than electric hot water heating. So if you're going to go tankless, you should still do a gas, because they have gas tankless. The electric hot water heating is expensive. So some people have electric hot water heaters, and that makes their electric bill higher. So like if you live in a condo where everything is electric, you can expect a much higher electric consumption. But I think overall, being tankless is more energy efficient than having a tank. A tankless gas hot water heater is far better than a gas hot water heater with a tank. And by the same token, tankless electric is going to be a lot better than tanked electric. When you're switching from gas to electric or from electric to gas, it's hard. It's more difficult to make an apples to apples comparison. And the only other thing I'd like to leave you with is when you do go shopping for an appliance and you see those yellow energy stickers that say how much it's supposed to cost, just remember that those stickers are for the people in the store when they're buying the device. If you have a hot water heater at home that you installed in 1997 and it says this device is supposed to cost this much, that information is no good anymore. So those numbers come from the Federal Energy Star, based on like household energy consumption, and they're based on the typical household consumption and the typical energy prices, and they really don't have much to do with you as a specific individual or with our particular price plans and pricing structure in Illinois. So it's just basically it's a guideline. It's not to be taken as gospel.
Thank you so much for coming. We are going to rebroadcast this on our cable network. So if you want to rewatch something, you're more than welcome to catch what you might have wanted to take more notes on or something. We'll also play it on our YouTube channel on our website. So if you have access to the Village website, then we'll be playing it on our YouTube, and I will make sure that's posted. Finally, we will be having, as Aimee suggested, the utility bill clinic. So for anyone either watching at home or anyone here that would like to participate, it's free. It's on Friday, April 8th from 1 to 5 p.m. We do encourage that people call to let C.U.B know that you're coming. Is it possible to make an appointment time or a range or?
Yeah, well, if it's that long, like from 1 to 5, we can give you a time slot. So, because we wouldn't want 30 people to show up at 1 o'clock and have to sit around. So, but it's just a crowd control device. It's not a guarantee. So if you register for 2 o'clock and you get here and you have to wait until 2:15, we can't guarantee, because we might have one person who has 20 questions and another person that just sits down and says, we just say, hey, your electric bill looks great. Keep up the good work. And that's all there is to talk about. So the person who handles, you can call and double check if you'd like to know. I don't think they do reply necessarily, because sometimes if we have a big event, it's actually even just in voicemail. So it's just for us to know, to get an idea of how many people are coming. If you want to double check, you can call our office. And on the back, there is a flyer about how to schedule an event. So if you like what you heard today, or if you like the idea of the utility bill clinic and you'd like to bring it to another group that you participate in at your library or Lions Club or church or something like that, homeowner association, you can schedule those. So the person who does all that is named Erica, and her extension is on the flyer.
To register for the bill clinic, it's 1-877-782-7005. And then, like she said, she can also email events@citizensutilityboard.org using the subject line Hoffman Estates 4-8. We do run them periodically, so we try to do them a couple times a year with C.U.B. And so, again, the number is 877-782-7005. And also, we'll post all of the information that Aimee was talking about, the handouts, on a village webpage. So hoffmanestates.org/S as in Sam, C as in Charlie. So it's our Sustainability Commission page. So hoffmanestates.org/SC, and we'll make sure we post that information that she handed out.